Dr. Kathy Bush.
And hello, I'm Dr. Tara Peters, and we are the Leadership Doctors. And today we have a wonderful guest that is a part of our lessons from leaders, Dr. Joe Seabrooks, who's the president at Cedar Valley College. That's a part of the Dallas County Community College District here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And so we're just looking forward to a great conversation today with Dr. Seabrooks. And so welcome, Dr. Seabrooks.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the kind invitation, and I hope this will be useful to your viewers.
Well, we're certain of that, and we're really looking forward to the conversation. So I think it'd be a good place for us to start in terms of you talking us through your leadership journey, describing that to us, and then talking to us about your current role at Cedar Valley College.
Great. Well, thank you. You know, my leadership journey in higher education really started early in life. I knew pretty early, even in my undergraduate experience, that I wanted to have a career in higher ed administration. And so because of that, I was able to, after completing my bachelor's degree, was able to go straight into higher ed graduate programs. And because I was a student athlete, I had the kind of academic support that I really needed to make that possible, because I think at my alma mater, the University of Missouri, Kansas City, I was the first in our Division I era to be in graduate school while still competing. And so, after completing my master's degree, was able to enter the profession also at the University of Missouri, Kansas City in advancement. And I spent the first 5 years of my career working with folks who were deeply invested in the students' experience and wanted to do whatever they can to support as alumni. And to be honest with you, that advancement experience is a foundation for how I see and how I operate. In fact, I learned very early I like to treat students, faculty, staff as if they are our most wealthiest donor. And so with that level of respect, and it has served me well, even when that treatment hasn't always been reciprocated. Was able to transition over to student development, where I was filled a vacancy unexpectedly left in our multicultural student affairs office, and was able to really connect the dots between advancement, students' needs, affinity group needs, and as a student of color who was active, was really able to do some groundbreaking programming and had some phenomenal success in students completing and actually even entering the higher ed profession. Soon thereafter, got the opportunity to provide institutional leadership for diversity, became the inaugural chief diversity officer at UMKC, and realized in a very short period of time that that's not where my gifts lie, and that's not where my interests belong. And so I made the transition with my blushing, beautiful bride and my one-year-old son, and we went down to the booming metropolis of Fayetteville, Arkansas, where I served as assistant vice chancellor for student development, and had a fantastic experience. Was really at a place that was very deeply invested in the success of students, but had some revenue streams that my previous experience didn't have. And so we were able to do some fantastic things for students. Well, to go back in for a minute, I had made the declaration pretty early, probably when I was about 23 years old, that I was going to become a college president. And then as people laughed and giggled at that idea, how ridiculous that was, I doubled down and made the commitment that I was going to be one before I turned 40. And so, and at the right old age of 35, got the first opportunity to go back to Kansas City, where I joined the Metropolitan Community College District, serving as the third president at the Metropolitan Community College Blue River campus. And it was my first entree into the community college world. There was quite a learning curve, but made sure that I understood the nuances and differences, and structurally, and spent about 9 years at that district. In addition to Blue River, served as the president at the Penn Valley campus, which was the urban campus, and learned a whole lot. Went through a whole lot of budget cuts, and the Great Recession, and all that what came with that. It was a really test of leadership at that moment. And then some very unfortunate circumstances occurred. I lost my mother-in-law. She lost her battle with breast cancer. And in our last conversation, she asked me to play a more active role in keeping the family together. And I kept that promise. And so as a result, when it was an opportunity to come down to Dallas, we chose to do so because both of my wife's sisters live in Houston. And so been a part of this fantastic district for about 4 years. And we have made some major shifts since my arrival, the biggest one being moving from 7 independently accredited colleges to 1 accredited college. We're in the midst of that now, while managing the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a result, I have been named interim Vice Chancellor for Student Success as we help coordinate all of our efforts to meet the students' needs on the enrollment management and student development side. And so that is how I am and who I am up to date. I'm sure I missed quite a bit, but I'm happy to go back and pick up what I missed.
Well, I love your career journey, and thank you for telling us the highlights of the story. And I especially love the determination that you had in pursuing a goal, even when people were like, nah, it'll never happen. And like you said, doubling down. And so it's really impressive journey. And so as you think about and kind of share with the folks who will be watching this, all of us are going through our variation of a struggle with the COVID-19 pandemic. What are some of the major challenges that you're facing with the various constituencies you lead at Cedar Valley?
Honestly, it's access to technology. I think that we took for granted, those of us who have some version of telecommuting just because of the nature of our work, whether it's working late or working early to get the job done. Many of our students are not necessarily in environments that allow for that. They hadn't budgeted for that or prepared for that. We actually have many professional staff who, technology is something that they navigate as necessary, but it hadn't been a part of their daily needs. I mean, other than the simple, accessing the Microsoft suite and turning on a computer to do basic things, but to fully rely on technology to communicate your needs and to communicate the needs of others and developing plans and strategies to meet those needs has been absolutely our challenge. It's really separated folks in a mighty way from the folks who are tech savvy, who can pick this up, to the folks who 3-4 weeks in are still struggling. And what's difficult about that is the talents that those folks bring that may not have the technological skills, unfortunately, is being diminished. They're not able to be the asset to the college as they were able to once before. And so how do we pick those folks up, move them forward to help them be productive, while trying to address the huge needs for students? It's been daunting. So the IT piece has just been across the board a challenge for almost every category.
As you were talking, Dr. Seabrooks, we've heard similar messages around just the challenges around technology, in part because one, operationally, you have to scale that. It's very different when a pocket of your operation is remote from work. Now we're talking about full scale and what that means from the equipment, from the training piece. And so in order to make those transitions and even navigate the hurdles that you talked about that you're encountering, I can imagine that there are some some tools, some principles, some values that you've been pulling on probably pretty heavily, during this time. And so give us a window, give us an insight in terms of what have been those values, those guiding principles that have helped you to be empathetic. You kind of alluded to that even earlier, but what's been helping you from a value proposition or value system perspective around this space that you find yourself in your role with Cedar Valley and the district?
Yeah, I don't know if this will answer your question, but one of the things that I'm grateful for, and that is my upbringing. I'm a Southerner at heart, and navigating people's emotions, watching for their body language, seeing their eye contact, even making eye contact, it's been a huge asset to me. To being able to connect with people who I haven't known very long in this new role, and particularly to get them to trust me and to help us move forward. I will tell you things like common courtesy and social graces are things that we have been lacking in our society of late, but it's really magnified in this environment. People who talk over each other and even okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna let you speak, but then you go ahead and speak anyway, and it's almost like it's like how I try to teach my kids how to just wait your turn, be patient, jot down your thought, and then when it's an opening, you come back in. And so oftentimes, and this may be controversial to say, but being who I am and with my background, oftentimes we are invisible to begin with, and it's interesting to see how that hasn't changed in this environment. And so I even oftentimes have to be assertive that I probably normally would have to be to make sure that my perspectives are on the table. And so I would imagine that that's true for many of us who find ourselves in this space because I don't know why I thought I had the delusion that it was somehow going to improve, but it just hasn't. So I don't know if that answers your question, but the common courtesy and just the basic read on people and how they're doing and what they're going through is something that it's helped me make some traction, but it's not consistent across the board.
Well, I think it absolutely answers the question because, how we behave is a reflection of our values. And so this notion of how we treat other people speaks volumes to who we are. And then that manifests itself in our practices. So no, you absolutely answered.
Great.
So as I was listening, Dr. Seabrooks, I was thinking about how you learned these things. And for many of the people who will be watching this, you put it out there at around age 23 that you were going to be a college president. I think you said 23. And so there might be some folks in that age range looking at their future and knowing I have some leadership potential, or I would like to have that opportunity. Maybe they're 33 or 43, but most of us are somewhere on our journey of development and still learning. And so could you give us a little bit of insight in terms of some of the tasks or activities you've taken on to help you develop not only the emotional intelligence you were just talking about, but also just, in general, your leadership skill, development journey?
Yeah, and so what's interesting about that, I have to kind of go back to maybe I was 21 or 22 before I made the declaration. I don't know where I got this information. It wasn't for me. It must have been kind of divine intervention. But for me, when I was going through that process, I had the notion to review job postings of college presidents. And so back then we had the Chronicle of Higher Ed, but it was a very big, large publication. And then back then it was also Black Issues in Higher Education. So those were my two frameworks. And so I would and both those publications were known for their job postings. And so I went through and I probably pulled out over a couple of months 20 to 25 postings, and I cut them all out and laid them all on a poster board, and I highlighted all the things in different colors that they all had in common. And it came back that there were like 10 things that they all had in common. It was public speaking, it was written communications, it was fundraising, it was dealing with complex personnel issues, conflict resolution, 10 things. And so those 10 things, I took them and I went to use my little network, and I got in to visit with current college presidents. And I asked them about their journey and took notes to see what I had in common or what gaps I needed to fill. But I asked them, about these 10 things, and they all pretty much validated that those are must-haves. So from that point on, early in my career, even back in my first development job, I try to do all 10 of those things in every job I had, whether it was budget, strategic planning. Even if I had a $500 budget, I made sure that I reconciled that budget and, went through all the processes. And so when it came time to apply for opportunities or be considered for opportunities, I may not have had the titles, but I could clearly demonstrate the competencies. In fact, it was the competencies that allowed me to advance pretty quickly at my alma mater, because people saw that I was able to, especially the human relation piece. And so and that's what I would encourage folks is to really understand, what capacity you must have and what skill sets you must have, and not only work on the ones where you have gaps, but also build on the ones where you're strong. And because none of us are I will promise you, I'm not good at all 10 of these things. But I think the things that I am the most proficient in are the things that people like the least. And that's the conflict management and the human relations piece. And so that's kind of my specialty, and it served me well. But you can't ignore the other things either. But you have to build teams around you that cover the gaps that you have.
So, Dr. Seabrooks, you've given us a lot to think about. As you were talking there, I thought he's already kind of answering the last question, but in terms of advice and just wisdom. But I want to frame it this way, because the pandemic is unique. It is, some people call it this whole, the idea of a 500-year flood. It's just that surprising and shocking in terms of just its impact on not just us here in the U.S., but it's a global pandemic. So what advice do you have, or what insights would you share for leaders who are dealing with the crisis right now in this moment, just like you are? What would you say to them in terms of advice that you would want them to think about or to implement?
Wow, I would say number one, embrace the moment. I wouldn't come across as helpless. I would be as thoughtful, as creative, as solution-driven as possible within the context of your organization. I think that many folks oftentimes are frozen by the gravity of the situation. And there's so many questions about how will this impact students? How will this impact the economy? How will it impact our budgets? How will it impact enrollment? But what you can really focus on is the now. What can you do to make sure that student that's vulnerable get through this moment so they can continue? What can you do now to help faculty who are so unsure, who need a word of encouragement and some support just to close the gap, or at least the perception of that gap, to make them better productive? Pick up the phone and call folks, or send. One of the things we're doing as a leadership team, we're sending out thinking of you emails to folks who we know are struggling, and say, hey, call me, or can I call you if you have any issues? We've put together a wellness campaign where our attempt is to call all 81,000 students. We've already texted them, but that's not the preferred communication for all of our students. And so we're going to call the other ones, and hopefully those will wrap up this week. At the end of the day, no matter how powerful we perceive our institutions are, institutions are only as good as the people in them. And never underestimate the power of a caring, committed connection. And so that's what you can do. Now, be organized and don't just be random, but there's some things about yourself that we are all ourselves that we're learning. And again, don't just focus on the things you're not good at, don't want to do. Focus on the things that you are gifted at, and kind of let that be, your specialty. When I think about professional athletics or even intercollegiate athletics, very few players can do it all, right? And so there's folks who they rely on their speed, they rely on their strength, or just their toughness. And so what are the things that make you uniquely equipped to give your institution a competitive edge? And make sure you leverage that and make that gift available to everyone who needs it. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah,
makes sense
no.
to me at least. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Actually, it's great advice, and we really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your insight, a bit about your journey. So for those of you who really enjoyed listening to Dr. Seabrooks sharing his lessons from leaders, we have a full series of other lessons from other leaders as well, and those are on our website. So please stay tuned for other days where we'll be posting other lessons from leaders on this social media site, or head to our website, theleadershipdoctors.com.